Today we're going to look at dividing fractions and mixed numbers using models. And so if you're following along in your term notebook, make sure you're looking at the correct problem. The first problem we're going to look at says, you are making brownies for a bake sale. A recipe for 1 pan of brownies calls for 2/3 cup of oil. If you have 8 cups of oil, how many pans of brownies could you make? Now before we even start on this, let's talk about a little bit about why it's division. So what we start with is the 8 cups of oil. And what do we want to do with that? Well, we want to use 2/3 of a cup of it to make a pan of brownies. And if I still have some left, I want to use another 2/3 to make another pan of brownies. And I want to keep on using 2/3 at a time until I've used all of the oil. So what that really is repeated subtraction. And repeated subtraction is division. So the particular division problem that we're doing here, the problem is going to be 8 divided by 2/3. And the reason the 8 comes first in the problem is because the 8 represents the oil. The oil is what's being split up. And the 2/3 comes second because that represents how the oil is being split. It's being split into parts that are each 2/3 of a cup. So if we want to draw this problem out, we're going to start by drawing what we started with. We started with 8 cups of oil. So we're going to draw 8 rectangles for our 8 cups of oil. And then we're going to have to go back, once we've done that, we're going to have to go back and split our 8 cups of oil up into thirds. Now the reason we're splitting into thirds is because of our denominator that says 3. So we have to split each of our 8 cups into thirds, because then once we split it into thirds, we can figure out how many groups of 2/3 we're going to have. All right, so now I've taken my 8 wholes and I've split them into parts that are each 1/3. I want to know now how many groups of 2/3 I have. So I want you to imagine I've got these 8 measuring cups completely filled with oil, and I'm going to start pouring out oil. And I want to show how I'm pouring out the oil. So let's start here. I'm going to pour out this much from the first cup of oil. So that's 2/3 of a cup of oil. So that means I've been able now to make 1 pan of brownies. So that's my first pan of brownies. But I still have some oil left in that cup, so I'm going to use this other third, and then I need a third from the next cup of oil. So now I've been able to make 2 pans of brownies. So if I'm keeping count of my pans of brownies, so far I have 1 pan of brownies, 2 pans of brownies that I've been able to make because I have 2 groups that are each 2/3 of a cup. I'm going to continue shading in 2/3 at a time until I've used all of the oil. Here's another 2/3. Then I can use 2/3 here and 2/3 here. Those two together make 2/3. Those two together. And then here's another 2/3 and another 2/3. And then these two together make another 2/3. 2/3 here, 2/3 here, 2/3 here. Those two together make 2/3. And there's another group of 2/3. So if I go back now and count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 groups of 2/3. So I'm able to make 12 pans of brownies because I can make 12 groups that are each 2/3 using 8 cups of oil rather. So that's our first problem. And in that problem, again, we were doing 8 divided by 2/3. So let's look at another problem. If an average animated movie lasts 1.5 hours, how many animated movies could you watch in 6 hours? So imagine yourself, you've got all your DVDs laid out, you've got your popcorn ready, you've got your drink ready, you're going to sit in the recliner for a nice long day of watching movies. You're actually going to watch for 6 hours. And so you want to kind of figure out, well, how many movies am I going to be able to watch? So thinking about this, then you're going to need to take your 6 hours and split it into parts, and each of those parts is going to be 1.5 hours. So to draw a model of this, the first thing I need to draw is my 6 hours, because that's how long I'm going to watch TV. Now notice each rectangle here is going to represent 1 hour, because I'm drawing 6 of them, and there are 6 hours that I'm going to watch TV. So that represents my 6 hours. I'm going to split my 6 hours each into 2 parts. And the reason I'm splitting into 2 parts is because of my denominator of 2 in the 1.5. And then I'm going to shade in groups that are each 1.5. So my first group is going to be 1 whole hour and 1/2 of another hour. Now, it might be helpful to realize right here that the mixed number 1.5 is actually equal to the improper fraction 3/2. If you go back here and you look, we just shaded in 1, 2, 3 halves. So that's going to represent our first movie. I'm going to keep on shading groups of 1.5 or 3 halves. They mean the same thing. So 1, 2, 3 halves. It's going to represent a second movie. 1, 2, 3 halves, and 1, 2, 3 halves. So when I go back and I sort of circle that all in, I've got another group of 3 halves here, or 1.5, so that makes my second movie. Here's my third movie. And I was able to round out the day with 4 movies, or 4 groups of 1.5 hours are in 6 hours. So I was able to watch 4 movies. Let's look at another example. So 6 friends share half a bag of M&Ms equally. What portion of the bag did each person get? So let's think about this one for just a minute. We know this is a division because we've got some key words here. It says we're going to share equally. Well, sharing equally is division. What is it that we're sharing? We're sharing the half a bag of M&Ms. We're going to share half a bag of M&Ms. So we're going to do 1/2, and how are we sharing it? 6 friends are sharing it. 1/2 divided by 6. That's the problem that we're going to want to model. So to model that, we're going to start by drawing our 1/2, which is our bag of M&Ms. And I'm going to shade half of the bag of M&Ms. So when I look at that now, that's the part that we're going to share. And there are 6 people who are going to share it. So I need to now split this into 6 parts. So I now have split it into 6 parts. There are 6 shares there of the M&Ms. So if I'm going to share with other people, for example, this part right here might be the part that I get. So this part right here then is my answer, except I'm not quite done yet because it says what portion of the bag did each person get. I get 1/6 of the M&Ms, but that's not the portion of the bag I get. I have to continue and divide my bag all the way, the whole bag, into 6 parts. So notice that when I do that, the part that I get is 1 out of 12 parts. So the answer is 1/12 of a bag. So I get 1/12 of a bag of M&Ms. Now just for a minute, I want to look at that same problem, but I changed one thing just a little bit. I said now we're going to share 2/3 of a bag of M&Ms. So now it's 2/3, and I'm still sharing with 6 people. And I want to point this out to you because sometimes people would have a little bit of a problem with this one. This would be a little bit harder because our fraction isn't just a unit fraction, meaning the numerator is 1. So this time I got to split my bag into thirds and shade in 2 of the thirds. Now, I want to know what portion each person is going to get. So I can still split it into 6 parts. And remember, I can go ahead actually and split the whole bag into 6 parts. And when I do that, notice that my section is going to be this section right here. And it really could have been any of the columns. For example, I could have said that it was this one, or I could have said it was this one. It doesn't really matter which column I say. It's just the point is that I get one of those columns. So that's my section. Notice I don't just get this one box right here. I get the whole section. So I actually get all of this right here. So the section that I get is 2 pieces out of 18 pieces. So I get 2/8 or 1/9 of the bag, or 2/18 rather, or 1/9 of the bag. And again, that was just a little bit different than the other one because we have to take into account that there's 2 little pieces there that I get. All right, let's look at one more problem. This problem says, a deli slices meat 1/8 inch thick. How many slices could be cut from a block that is 3/4 of an inch thick? So thinking about this, I have a block of deli meat. My block of deli meat is 3/4 of an inch thick, and I want to cut it into equal pieces. Each piece is going to be 1/8 of an inch thick. So this is asking me to do the problem 3/4, which is the original piece of a chunk of deli meat that I started with, divided into pieces, and each piece has to be 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to start with 3/4 of it shaded, 3/4 of an inch. So now that I have 3/4 of this shaded, I want to know how many pieces that are each 1/8 of an inch I'm going to be able to cut from that. Well, now there's a problem because I need to know how many eighths it is. And right now I'm showing fourths. So I really need to make this actually look like eighths rather. So if I can rethink this, I'm going to rethink my 3/4, or I'm going to split this into 8 parts. Notice when I split it into 8 parts that I'm going to have right here, this is where it's going to line up. So when I look at that, if I want to know how many eighths are in 3/4, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces that are each 1/8 of an inch thick. So 3/4 divided by 1/8 is going to be 6 slices. I would be able to get 6 slices that are each 1/8 of an inch thick. Now that one's a little different, and I like drawing a separate rectangle to show that because it's a little bit hard to see maybe where your original 3/4 is if you try to draw it, if you try to draw the eighths on top of it. So you can experiment around and see what works the best for you. But this model that I drew shows 3/4 divided by 1/8, and it shows that my answer is I can get 6 slices that are each 1/8 from a piece that was 3/4 of an inch thick.